Can we build AI agents with infinite memory? That is an interesting question, and one tool which might get us there is Mem0, and this is what we're gonna have a look at right now in this video. So Mem0, if you don't know it so far, it is a free open source Python package which we can use in order to store memory in a database and then add this memory to our chats with the AI agents. That's basically how it works. So it's a kind of RAG system, but it's kind of better than RAG because what it only does, it's storing the most important points in the database, and then it does CRUD operations. So it updates the database regularly, it deletes records, and so on. And how it works, we're gonna have a look at this right now. So as I said, it's an open source Python package, so you can find it on GitHub if you want to use it as well. And then you can just install it. It's kind of simple. As you can see here, if you scroll down, the quick start guide, use pip, for instance, or UV, any kind of package manager, and then it's called Mem0 AI, basically. You can also install it via Node if you want to do that. It's also available here. And let's have a look at it and how it works. So let me open the cursor here. And as you can see here, we just import the package, and when we create a client, so basically that's the memory client. And then you can load the .env variable, so you create an account with Mem0 because then you can store it in the cloud. But you can also run it locally if you want to do that, for instance with Quadrant or a vector database of your choice. I've also tried that, and this also works. So, but now we use the cloud version, and what we do is basically we instantiate the client, as you can see here, and then it's kind of similar to OpenAI chat API actually. So the chat endpoint, or chat completion endpoint, because you have messages here, and you specify a role and a content, for instance like that, in a list, and then you add this to the client. And what's very important is that you also add a user ID. So basically the data is stored with a user ID. In this case it's Alex as an example here. I took this from their website, and we store it in the database but with the user ID as a key. So then next time if we start a new session, then Mem0 is then able to pick up, based on the user ID, what is stored in the database, and then give this information back and add it to the prompt of the LLM. That's the idea. And as you can see here, we just add this here and then we search. This is an example because here we say that Alex is a vegetarian and allergic to nuts, and then basically we have here the query, what to cook for dinner, right? And then we can run this. Let's just do that quickly. So if we do this here and write simple Python and then simple.py, and we run this, then we should get here just in a second a result and give actually here what is found in the database. Because what this basically does is, as you can see here, it's actually adding the data first, so it might take a little bit of time the first time, but then it searches it. So it's kind of vector search, which happens based also on the user ID in the database. And while this is still running, shouldn't take too long right now, and I'll show you then later on what does it look like online in the host itself, because as I said, it's stored in the database, and then we can see this. So let's go there for now until this is done. As you can see here, we have memories for Alex, and then this is stored. Allergic to nuts, it's a vegetarian, name is Alex. So this is actually stored here under the user section inside Mem0. As you can see here, this is basically what it looks like if you have created an account and it's stored the memory in here. So let's go back. It should actually be done now. It took a little bit of time right now, but as you can see here, this is basically the search result which we get, right? So you can see here, the memory is a vegetarian and so on. And this basically, what it looked up here is then fed also in the LLM when we prompt it. So the LLM has then the knowledge about the user which is coming from here, which is related, of course, closely related to what the actual prompt is, right? It's kind of, as I said, it's a kind of RAG system. So that's the idea behind that. And now let's actually go to where it starts with Pi, because we would like to combine this, of course, right? So now this was only a lookup in the database itself, so storing and look the data up. But of course, we want to add this to then our agent, for instance, or let's say simply to when we call the chat completion endpoint, right? Because this is basically which we can then add as an AI agent if we add some tools and so on. So basically, if I go to start, as you can see here, I also instantiate Mem0 client here under this Mem0 client. The reason why I use warnings to filter warnings, by the way, is just because there's some kind of depreciation warning. There's a package in Mem0 currently which is not updated, so that's probably the issue here, though that's why I filtered the warnings out. And then again, I stored something here, which in this case is my name is Daniel. I love animes, especially reincarnated slime. And I also like to eat broccoli with a lot of cheese, right? So that's basically now the new content which I add, but important with a new user, right? So now I have a user Daniel, and I would like to add this to the Mem0 vector store, basically under the Daniel as user ID or as a key itself. And then we create here actually the combination with the chat completion endpoint from OpenAI, because then we have here again a user ID, we have a model which we can specify, and then basically we have the client which also adds the prompt in here. It's important to add a prompt, or basically to do the vector search, because this is what's happened here. So the user enters a prompt, then this prompt is then searched inside the vector store, but of course related to the user ID, so in this case to Daniel, not to Alex, which we've seen, which is also stored in the database. And then we add this, basically the memory we get from here, to, as you can see here, as a string to the prompt itself. So here we use the new responses API from OpenAI, not the chat completion one, but the responses, because it's a newer one. And then we simply add the prompt itself, which is the user question, but also the memory. So this is why it's kind of RAG system, right? Because we also put this in the prompt as well. So we look up the relevant information, which might be related to the prompt itself, add this also with the original prompt to the LLM, so the LLM is then able to also use the memory which is stored in the database in addition to what it knows maybe by default about the prompt to answer it, right? This is the idea. And that's basically what happens here. And then we can run this just as an example. Let's do that. Let's say for now we just do this, and then we just run the start file. So Python and then start.py. And then we take a look at the results. So as you can see here, I ask what kind of food I like, right? So that's why the model should actually give us some information about broccoli with cheese, because that's why I added it here to the database. And you can see here, there's the answer. You like to eat broccoli with a lot of cheese, right? And this is something we already know, right? We could also add this one time to the prompt and we're good to go. But the interesting part now is the following. What if we have a complete new user session, right? So let's say in this case, this is not what I want. So in this case, I do not add this up front. So I just remove this messages and the client itself here. So I do not add anything here and save this. And now I ask the question again. So let me do that. Let's write this question again, Python start.py. And the interesting part now, of course, normally, if we would not have added the memory, then of course, if a new session, in OpenAI would have no idea, so ChatGPT would have no idea, actually, what we like to eat, because this time we do not add it. But still, you can see we get the same result. And the reason for this is because, again, it was looked up in the database for the user Daniel, and user Daniel has stored in a prior conversation, could be, I don't know, 5 years from now, for instance, but in a prior conversation, I mentioned what I like. And because of that, OpenAI was then able to retrieve this from the database and then also add this to the prompt itself and then answer the question based on that, right? And that's the interesting part here. And that's why it's kind of in infinite memory, if you want to call it this way, because you now have a kind of vector store, which it is basically. It's a kind of RAG system, but it's optimized because it only stores relevant information. It can update information. It can delete information. I also tried, for instance, that I changed my name, and then it also was able to retrieve that my name has changed because the database was updated, right? Things like that also work. And it's doing this for each user individually, right? So you have a user ID. This is basically the primary key, which is used then to look up the relevant data, which is stored from prior conversations, and then add this to the prompt. So that's basically how it works. So that's MEM0. As I said, you can try this out for free if you want to do that. You can create an account there with your Google, for instance, Google account. You can do it, and you can use it either via the cloud service, as you've seen, or you can also use it locally. I also tried it, and if you want to do it locally, I would suggest you do it via Docker because it's quite easy to set up, and then use Quadrant as a vector store, and then you can do that as well. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Give it a try. Also let me know your thoughts. Maybe you've tried something like that before. Maybe you have used a different kind of tool, not MEM0. Also let me know. And if you liked the video, please share it. Please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. Thanks a lot. Take care and see you in the next video.